Emma Rodriguez stared at the eviction notice taped to her dorm room door, her hands trembling as she read the bold red letters demanding payment within 48 hours. The 22-year-old nursing student had been surviving on instant noodles and hope for months, but even those luxuries seemed impossible now. Her part-time job at the campus coffee shop barely covered textbooks, let alone rent, tuition, and basic necessities. She slumped against the cold hallway wall, fighting back tears. 3 years of medical school had drained every penny from her savings account, and her parents back in rural Texas couldn't help. Her father's construction business had failed during the economic downturn, and her mother worked double shifts at the local diner just to keep their family home. Emma had promised herself she would never burden them with her problems. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as students walked past, chatting about weekend plans and upcoming vacations. Emma felt invisible, like a ghost haunting the corridors of privilege. She had always been the scholarship kid, the one who studied while others partied, the one who wore thrift store clothes while classmates flaunted designer labels. But she had never felt the gap quite this keenly. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Sarah announcing another shopping spree funded by Daddy's credit card. Emma quickly stuffed the device back into her backpack, unable to bear the reminder of how different their worlds were. She needed a miracle, and she needed it fast. That evening, Emma found herself at Chez Laurent, the city's most exclusive restaurant, wearing her only decent dress and serving overpriced wine to people who spent more on appetizers than she earned in a week. The catering company had called her that morning, desperate for last-minute help at a private birthday celebration. The pay would barely make a dent in her mounting debts, but every dollar counted. The party was unlike anything Emma had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, and guests wore jewelry that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, refilling champagne glasses and clearing empty plates, trying to remain invisible. Then she noticed him sitting alone in the corner, away from the glittering crowd. Harold Winchester was turning 75 that night, but his sharp blue eyes held a vitality that defied his age. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit probably cost more than Emma's yearly tuition. Despite being surrounded by hundreds of well-wishers, he looked profoundly lonely. Their eyes met across the room when Emma approached to refill his water glass. Instead of looking through her like most wealthy guests did, he actually saw her. His smile was genuine, not the practiced politeness she had grown accustomed to from the upper class. "Thank you, dear," he said softly, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't quite place. "You have kind eyes. That's rare in my world." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "Just doing my job, sir." "Harold," he corrected gently. "And what's your name?" "Emma Rodriguez. A beautiful name for a beautiful young woman." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Would you sit with an old man for a moment? This party is supposed to be about me, but I find myself quite bored by all the pageantry." Emma glanced nervously around the room, knowing she could lose her job for socializing with guests. But something in Harold's expression made her pause. Beneath the expensive clothes and polished exterior, she recognized a familiar loneliness. "I really shouldn't," she whispered. "My supervisor is being well compensated to look the other way." Harold smiled, and Emma realized he had already thought of that. "Please, just for a few minutes." Against her better judgment, Emma sat down. Harold asked about her studies, her dreams, her family back in Texas. He listened with genuine interest as she described her goal of becoming a pediatric nurse, her love for helping children, and her determination to give back to underserved communities. She found herself opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone in months. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago," Harold said wistfully. She had the same fire in her eyes, the same determination to change the world. Before Emma could ask what he meant, the party coordinator approached their table with barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Winchester, your guests are waiting for the toast." Harold sighed and stood up, straightening his jacket. As he prepared to rejoin the celebration, He turned back to Emma with an intensity that made her heart skip. "I know this might sound crazy," he said quietly, "but I have a proposition for you. A business arrangement that could solve your financial problems." Emma's stomach dropped. She had heard similar offers before from wealthy men who thought her desperation made her available. "Mr. Winchester, I'm not that kind of marriage," he interrupted, his tone completely serious. "A legal marriage contract. You would receive immediate access to funds for your education and living expenses. In return, you would provide companionship and attend social functions as my wife. Nothing more intimate would be expected or required." Emma stared at him in shock. "Are you insane?" "Probably," Harold chuckled. "But I'm also very wealthy and quite lonely. I need a companion who isn't interested in my money for selfish reasons, someone genuine who could bring some joy to whatever time I have left. You need financial stability to pursue your dreams. It would be mutually beneficial." "You don't even know me," Emma protested. "I know enough. You're kind, intelligent, hardworking, and have integrity. Those qualities are rarer than diamonds in my social circle." He pulled out an elegant business card and placed it on the table. "Think about it. If you're interested, call me tomorrow. If not, I understand completely, and I wish you all the best in your studies." With that, Harold Winchester walked away to rejoin his party, leaving Emma staring at the business card in complete bewilderment. Around her, the celebration continued in full swing, but she felt as if time had stopped. The eviction notice in her backpack seemed to burn against her spine, while Harold's impossible offer echoed in her mind. As she resumed her serving duties, Emma caught glimpses of Harold throughout the evening. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and making small talk, but his eyes kept finding her across the room. Each time their gazes met, she felt that same jolt of recognition, as if they were conspirators sharing a secret in a room full of strangers. By the end of the night, Emma had Harold's business card memorized, though she still couldn't believe the conversation had actually happened. As she rode the bus back to campus, the city lights blurring past the window, she wondered if desperation was making her consider the impossible. Emma spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, Harold's business card burning a hole in her wallet. Every rational thought screamed that marrying a stranger was insane, but desperation had a way of making crazy ideas seem reasonable. When dawn broke through her thin curtains, she still had no answer. The morning brought fresh horrors. Her laptop, essential for completing her final nursing assignments, had finally given up after years of abuse. The screen flickered once before going permanently black, taking 3 weeks of research with it. Emma wanted to scream, but even that luxury felt too expensive in a dorm full of sleeping students. Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother asking how school was going. Emma typed and deleted a dozen different responses, unable to bring herself to admit the truth. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had. How could she tell them she was failing? At precisely noon, Emma found herself standing outside the gleaming tower that housed Winchester Industries. The lobby was all marble and gold, with security guards who looked like they could bench press small cars. She almost turned around 3 times before finally approaching the reception desk. "I'm here to see Mr. Harold Winchester," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The perfectly groomed receptionist looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" Emma held up the business card with shaking fingers. "He told me to call, but I thought I'd come in person instead." 20 minutes later, Emma was sitting in the most luxurious office she had ever seen, watching Harold pour tea from what looked like an antique silver service. Everything about the space screamed old money and power, from the original oil paintings to the Persian rug that probably cost more than most people's houses. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Harold said, settling into the chair across from her. In the harsh daylight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see every line on his face, but his eyes remained sharp and kind. "I wasn't sure either," Emma admitted. "This is completely insane. The best decisions usually are." Harold leaned forward slightly. Have you given any thought to my proposal? Emma took a deep breath. I need to understand what you really want. Nobody offers marriage to a stranger without ulterior motives. Harold was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city skyline. My first wife died 15 years ago. Cancer. We were married for 38 years, and losing her nearly destroyed me. I threw myself into work, built this empire, accumulated more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But money can't buy companionship. And it certainly can't buy love. He turned back to Emma, and she was surprised to see vulnerability in his expression. I'm not looking for love, Emma. That ship sailed long ago, but I am looking for someone genuine to share whatever time I have left. Someone who sees me as a person, not a bank account. What about your family? Your children? Harold's face darkened slightly. My son died in a car accident 12 years ago. He was driving drunk, crashed into a tree at 90 miles per hour. My daughter, well, let's just say she's made it very clear that she's only interested in her inheritance. She hasn't spoken to me in 3 years except through lawyers. Emma felt a pang of sympathy. Despite his wealth and success, Harold Winchester seemed profoundly alone. I'm sorry. That must be incredibly painful. It is. Which brings me back to my proposition. Harold reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick legal document. This is a marriage contract. It's all perfectly legal and above board. You would receive a monthly allowance of $50,000 plus all living expenses, medical insurance, and full tuition coverage for your remaining studies. Emma's eyes widened. $50,000 was more money than her family had ever seen at one time. That's incredibly generous, but what do you get out of it? Companionship. Someone to attend social functions with, someone to travel with occasionally, someone to have dinner conversations with who isn't trying to sell me something or extract money from me. You would have your own living quarters in my home, complete. Privacy and independence. The only requirement would be that you wear a wedding ring and play the role of my wife in public. And if I want to end the arrangement? There's a clause for that. If either party wishes to dissolve the marriage, you would receive a settlement of $5 million. Consider it a graduation gift. Harold slid the contract across the desk. I've had my lawyers make sure everything is completely legitimate and in your favor. Emma stared at the document, her mind reeling. $5 million would not only solve all her problems, but set her up for life. She could finish school, pay off her parents' debts, and start her own practice serving underprivileged communities. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Why me? She asked. You could have your pick of anyone. Harold smiled sadly. Because you're the first person in 20 years who looked at me and saw a lonely old man instead of a dollar sign. Because you have integrity, which is rarer than you might think in my world. And because something in your eyes reminds me of hope, which I thought I had lost forever. Emma felt tears threatening. This is so overwhelming. I understand. It's a big decision. Harold stood up and walked to the window. I should mention that there are some complications in my life right now. Business matters that are sensitive. Nothing dangerous, just complex. If you agree to this arrangement, there might be scrutiny from various parties who have interests in my affairs. Something in his tone made Emma pause. What kind of complications? Harold waved a dismissive hand. Corporate politics, mostly. Some people aren't happy with decisions I've made recently. Nothing you need to worry about. Emma wasn't entirely convinced, but the weight of her problems pressed down on her like a physical force. Her eviction notice gave her less than 24 hours to come up with rent money. Her broken laptop meant she couldn't complete her assignments. Her parents needed help they were too proud to ask for. If I agree, she said slowly, when would this happen? Tomorrow, if you're willing. I have a judge who could perform the ceremony privately. We could keep it simple, just a legal formality. Tomorrow. Emma's voice cracked. That's so fast. Sometimes fast is better. Gives you less time to talk yourself out of the right decision. Harold returned to his seat, his expression gentle but serious. Emma, I want you to understand something. This arrangement would change your life completely. You'd be entering a world that can be quite ruthless. There would be people who wouldn't understand or approve of our marriage. Are you prepared for that? Emma thought about her empty bank account, her failing laptop, the eviction notice that would make her homeless in hours. She thought about her dreams of helping sick children, dreams that were slipping away with each passing day. She thought about her parents working themselves to death just to survive. I need some time to think, she said finally. Harold nodded. Of course, but Emma, I do need an answer by tonight. There are certain arrangements I need to make, legal papers to file. If you decide yes, call me by 8 o'clock. If you decide no, I completely understand, and I wish you nothing but happiness. As Emma left the gleaming tower and walked back onto the busy street, her head was spinning. The contract felt heavy in her backpack, both literally and metaphorically. She had 6 hours to decide whether to marry a stranger or watch her dreams crumble into dust. The city hummed around her as she wandered aimlessly, trying to process what had just happened. In her pocket, Harold's business card had been joined by a cashier's check for $10,000, a good faith gesture he had insisted she take regardless of her decision. It was more money than she had ever held in her hands. As evening approached, Emma found herself sitting in a small park, watching children play while their parents chatted nearby. This was what she wanted her future to look like: helping families, making a difference in young lives, building something meaningful. Harold's offer could make all of that possible, but at what cost? At exactly 7:59 that evening, Emma dialed Harold's number with trembling fingers. Her decision had crystallized during a tearful phone call with her mother, who had tried to hide the worry in her voice while asking if Emma needed anything. The answer was yes to Harold's proposal, though she could barely believe the words coming out of her mouth. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Emma's surreal mood as she stood in front of Judge Patricia Morrison's private chambers. Harold had arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Emma wore the same dress she had worn to serve at his birthday party, her only outfit nice enough for what felt like the most bizarre wedding in history. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly officiated these types of arrangements before. She spoke efficiently through the legal requirements, asking for signatures and witnesses with all the romance of a business transaction. Emma's hands shook as she signed document after document, each one making the situation feel more real and more impossible at the same time. By the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Judge Morrison announced with professional detachment. You may kiss the bride, though I understand this is a contractual arrangement. Harold leaned forward and placed the gentlest kiss on Emma's cheek, his lips barely grazing her skin. Thank you, he whispered, and she wasn't sure if he was thanking her or the judge. Within an hour of the ceremony, Emma found herself being driven through the exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood in Harold's pristine Mercedes. The houses grew larger and more impressive with each block, until they pulled through ornate gates into a circular driveway, fronting what could only be described as a mansion. Welcome home, Mrs. Winchester, Harold said softly as they approached. The massive front door. The name sent a chill down Emma's spine. Mrs. Winchester, she was married, to a man she had known for exactly 48 hours. The enormity of what she had done hit her like a physical blow, but it was too late to turn back now. Harold, S home was even more impressive inside than out. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings and priceless artwork adorned every wall. A curved staircase with an ornate banister swept up to the second floor, and Emma could glimpse multiple sitting rooms, a library, and what appeared to be a ballroom through various doorways. Your quarters are on the east wing, Harold explained as he led her up the staircase. Completely private, with your own entrance if you prefer. I've taken the liberty of having some clothes delivered in what I hoped was your size. Emma's suite was larger than her family's entire house back in Texas. A sitting room flowed into an enormous bedroom, which connected to a bathroom that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of an expertly maintained garden, and a walk-in closet had been stocked with clothes that still had tags attached. This is incredible, Emma breathed, running her fingers along silk curtains that probably cost more than her yearly income. "I want you to be comfortable," Harold replied, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper, can help you get oriented. She's been with me for 12 years and is completely trustworthy." Over the next few days, Emma tried to settle into her new reality. Mrs. Chen, a kind woman in her 50s, showed her around the house and explained the daily routines. There was a cook who prepared gourmet meals, a groundskeeper who maintained the extensive gardens, and a driver who was available whenever needed. It was like living in a luxury hotel where she happened to be the only guest. Harold was unfailingly polite but kept his distance, respecting her privacy, while making sure she had everything she needed. They shared dinner each evening in the formal dining room, making careful conversation about her studies, current events, and safe topics that didn't venture too deep into personal territory. He seemed genuinely interested in her opinions and listened attentively when she talked about her nursing program. "I've arranged for a new laptop to be delivered tomorrow," Harold mentioned during their third dinner together. "Along with anything else you might need for your studies. I want you to feel free to focus completely on your education." Emma felt a flush of gratitude mixed with awkwardness. "You don't have to do all this." "Yes, I do. It's part of our agreement, and more importantly, it's what I want to do." Harold's expression grew serious. "Emma, I want you to understand that despite the unusual circumstances of our marriage, I take the commitment seriously. As long as you're my wife, I will do everything in my power to ensure your happiness and success." That night, Emma lay in her enormous bed staring at the ornate ceiling, trying to process her new life. Everything felt dreamlike and temporary, as if she might wake up back in her cramped dorm room with an eviction notice on the door. The wedding ring on her finger felt foreign and heavy, a constant reminder of the bargain she had struck. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, her former roommate, asking where she had disappeared to. Emma stared at the message for a long time before typing back that she had some family matters to attend to and would be in touch soon. The lie came easier than she had expected, but the truth was impossible to explain. On her fourth morning in Daoi, the house, Emma was eating breakfast in the sunroom when Mrs. Chen approached with a worried expression. "Mrs. Winchester, there are some people here to see Mr. Harold. They say they're from the government, something about taxes and business matters. He's asked me to tell you to stay in your room until they leave." Emma's stomach clenched. "Is everything all right?" "I'm sure it's just boring business stuff," Mrs. Chen said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Mr. Harold handles these things all the time. Nothing for you to worry about." But Emma was worried. From her bedroom window, she could see black SUVs parked in the circular driveway and men in dark suits walking around the property with serious expressions. Whatever was happening downstairs, it didn't look like a routine tax audit. Harold didn't come to dinner that evening, and Mrs. Chen brought Emma her meal on a tray, with an apologetic explanation that he was dealing with business matters, and sent his regrets. Emma spent the evening pacing her room, her imagination running wild with possibilities. Late that night, she heard voices in the hallway outside her door. Harold was speaking in low, urgent tones with someone she didn't recognize. She pressed her ear to the door but could only catch fragments of the conversation. "Need to be careful," Harold was saying. "Investigation is just beginning," came the unfamiliar voice. "She doesn't know anything." Harold again. "For her sake, it better stay that way." Emma's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Whatever trouble Harold was in, it was serious enough that government agents were involved, and somehow her ignorance was supposed to protect her. She crept back to her bed, her mind racing with questions and fears. The next morning at breakfast, Harold appeared tired and stressed, though he tried to maintain his usual polite demeanor. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his normally perfect hair looked like he had been running his hands through it. "Is everything all right?" Emma asked carefully. "Of course," Harold replied quickly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Just some tedious business matters. Nothing that should concern you." But Emma was concerned more than she could safely express. She had entered into this arrangement thinking it was simply about loneliness and companionship. But clearly there were layers to Harold Winchester that she was only beginning to discover. The question was whether she wanted to know what secrets lay beneath his generous exterior, or whether ignorance truly was safer. As she sipped her coffee and watched Harold read his newspaper with forced casualness, Emma realized that her strange, new marriage was about to become much more complicated than either of them had bargained for. Emma's curiosity finally overwhelmed her caution on the 7th day of her marriage. Harold had left for what he called important meetings early that morning, and the house felt eerily quiet. Mrs. Chen was busy with laundry in the basement, and the cook had gone to the market. For the first time since arriving, Emma found herself completely alone in the mansion. She told herself she was just exploring her new home as she wandered through rooms she hadn't seen before. The house seemed to have endless corridors and hidden spaces, like something from a Gothic novel. She discovered a music room with a grand piano, a greenhouse filled with exotic orchids, and a wine cellar that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. It was while admiring the leather-bound books in Harold's private study that Emma noticed something odd. One section of the bookshelf looked different from the others, and when she pressed against it experimentally, it swung inward like a door. Her heart pounding, she found herself staring into a hidden room that Harold clearly hadn't intended for her to discover. The secret room was small but packed with filing cabinets, computers, and what looked like surveillance equipment. Charts and maps covered the walls, connected by red string like something from a detective movie. Emma stepped inside, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The first thing that caught her eye was a bulletin board, covered with photographs and documents. Her own face stared back at her from what looked like a background check report, complete with her social security number, school records, and even her parents' financial information. Harold hadn't just met her by chance at that party. He had known exactly who she was. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. As Emma looked closer at the other documents, she began to piece together a story that made her blood run cold. Harold Winchester wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was apparently involved in something much darker and more complex than she had ever imagined. Financial records showed massive transfers of money to accounts in countries she couldn't even pronounce. There were shipping manifests for cargo that was vaguely described as agricultural equipment, but was being sent to regions that definitely didn't need farming supplies. Most disturbing of all were communications with people who seemed to have code names rather than real identities. Emma, S hands shook as she opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were detailed profiles of dozens of people, including politicians, judges, and business leaders. Each file contained personal information, financial records, and what looked like leverage-compromising photos, evidence of affairs, records of illegal activities. Harold Winchester appeared to be running some kind of information brokerage, collecting secrets and trading them for influence. A folder labeled Project Nightingale caught her attention, and when she opened it, Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. The project was a detailed plan to infiltrate medical institutions using nursing students and recent graduates. The goal was to gain access to patient records, particularly those of wealthy or politically important individuals, and use that information for blackmail or manipulation. Emma realized with growing horror that she wasn't Harold's wife. She was his unwitting agent. Her nursing background, her financial desperation, her clean record, and her access to medical facilities made her the perfect candidate for his scheme. The marriage wasn't about companionship at all. It was a recruitment operation. The sound of a car in the driveway made Emma's heart nearly stop. She quickly photographed several documents with her phone, closed the filing cabinet, and rushed out of the hidden room, making sure the bookshelf door was properly sealed. By the time Harold entered the house, she was sitting in the sunroom with a textbook, trying to look like she had been studying all morning. "Good afternoon, dear," Harold said, joining her for lunch as if nothing had changed. But Emma noticed that his eyes were more watchful than usual, and he seemed to be studying her carefully. "How were your meetings?" Emma asked, proud that her voice sounded normal despite the panic racing through her veins. "Productive," Harold replied vaguely. "I have some exciting news, actually. I've arranged for you to start a part-time position at St. Mary's Hospital next week." It's a perfect opportunity to get practical experience while finishing your degree. Emma's stomach clenched. St. Mary's Hospital was where several prominent politicians and business leaders received their medical care. Harold was already putting his plan into motion, using her as his inside source without her knowledge or consent. "That's wonderful," she managed to say, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Over the next few days, Emma lived in a state of barely controlled terror. She maintained her normal routine, attending classes and having dinner conversations with Harold, but every interaction felt like a minefield. She found herself analyzing his every word and gesture, looking for signs that he suspected she had, discovered his secret. Harold, for his part, seemed more attentive than usual. He asked detailed questions about her studies, particularly her upcoming clinical rotations. He wanted to know which departments she would be working in, which doctors she would be assisting, and which patients she might encounter. Each question felt like another piece of evidence confirming her worst fears. Emma began making careful plans for her escape. She couldn't go to the police. Harold clearly had connections throughout the government, and the agents who had visited the house might even be working with him. She couldn't confide in anyone at school without putting them in danger. Her only option was to gather evidence and find someone she could trust to help her bring Harold down. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Harold announced that he would be traveling to Europe for 2 weeks on business, leaving the next morning. Emma saw her chance to gather more evidence and find a way to expose his operation. "I'll miss you," Harold said as he kissed her cheek goodbye the next morning, and for a moment Emma almost believed there was genuine affection in his voice. Then she remembered the files in his secret room and steeled herself for what she had to do. As soon as Harold's car disappeared through the gates, Emma returned to the hidden room. She spent hours copying documents, taking photographs, and trying to understand the full scope of Harold's operation. What she discovered was even worse than she had initially thought. Harold wasn't just collecting information for blackmail. He was selling medical records and personal data to foreign governments, using his network of healthcare workers to gather intelligence on American citizens. The nursing students he recruited thought they were just helping with administrative tasks, never realizing they were actually committing treason. Emma found records showing that 3 previous wives had been part of similar arrangements. Each had been young, financially desperate, and perfectly positioned to access sensitive information. The files didn't say what had happened to them, but Emma noticed that all 3 had died in apparent accidents within months of their marriages to Harold. The final piece of the puzzle came when Emma found a folder with her own name on it. Inside was a detailed timeline showing how Harold's people had been monitoring her for months before they orchestrated their chance meeting at the birthday party. They had deliberately waited until her financial situation became desperate before making their move. But the most chilling discovery was a medical report showing that Harold Winchester was dying. He had been given less than 6 months to live, which explained his urgency to complete Project Nightingale. Emma wasn't just his unwitting agent. She was also his intended fall guy. When the authorities eventually uncovered the operation, all evidence would point to her as the mastermind, while Harold would be safely dead and beyond prosecution. Emma sat in the hidden room surrounded by evidence of betrayal and murder, realizing that her marriage to Harold Winchester wasn't just a business arrangement or even a criminal conspiracy. It was a death sentence, carefully planned and expertly executed. She had 7 days before Harold returned from Europe to figure out how to expose his operation and save her own life. The scared nursing student who had agreed to marry a lonely old man was gone. In her place was a woman who had discovered strength she never knew she possessed, and a determination to bring down the monster who had tried to destroy her. Harold Winchester had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated Emma Rodriguez, and that mistake was going to cost him everything. Emma spent 3 sleepless nights copying every document in Harold's secret room, her phone's memory filling up with photographs of evidence that could bring down his entire operation. She worked in complete darkness after midnight, using only her phone's flashlight to avoid detection by the household staff who might report unusual activity to Harold. On the 4th night, she made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden behind a false back in one of the filing cabinets was a safety deposit box key, and a letter addressed to her. With trembling hands, Emma opened the envelope and read Harold's familiar handwriting. "My dear Emma, if you are reading this, then you have discovered my secret room and learned the truth about our arrangement. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but I knew your intelligence and curiosity would eventually lead you here. What you have discovered is only half the story, and the half you don't know might surprise you." Emma's hand shook as she continued reading. Harold's letter explained that he had indeed been involved in international intelligence work, but not as a traitor selling American secrets. For the past 20 years, he had been working as a deep-cover asset for the CIA, using his business connections and wealth to gather intelligence on foreign operations targeting American interests. Project Nightingale wasn't about stealing medical records for blackmail. It was about identifying foreign agents who were already infiltrating American healthcare systems to poison or manipulate prominent political figures. The nursing students Harold recruited weren't gathering intelligence. They were serving as early warning systems, unknowingly helping to protect potential targets. "The agents who visited our home weren't investigating me," Harold wrote. "They were briefing me on a new threat. Someone has discovered my real identity and is planning to eliminate me. My marriage to you wasn't just about recruitment, Emma. It was about protection. As my wife, you have access to resources and information that could keep you safe if something happens to me." Emma felt like the world had turned upside down again. Everything she thought she knew about Harold's operation was wrong, but that didn't necessarily make it right. She had no way to verify whether his letter was telling the truth, or just another layer of deception designed to maintain her cooperation. The safety deposit box key led to an address downtown, and Emma knew she had to investigate before Harold returned from Europe. Using the driver Harold had assigned to her, she made an excuse about needing to visit the bank for school-related financial matters. What she found in the safety deposit box made her question everything once again. Inside were USB drives containing encrypted files, along with contact information for someone identified only as Agent Morrison, the same name as the judge who had married them. There was also a thick envelope containing $50,000 in cash, multiple passports with Emma's photo but different names, and a detailed escape plan with safe houses marked across 3 different states. But the most shocking item was a medical file showing that Harold's terminal diagnosis was fabricated. According to the real records, he was in perfect health for a man his age. The fake medical reports had been part of his cover story, designed to explain why he needed to accelerate certain operations and why he was making unusual personal arrangements like marrying a much younger woman. Emma felt a mixture of relief and betrayal. If Harold wasn't dying, then perhaps the previous wives hadn't been murdered to cover his tracks. But it also meant that every conversation they'd had about his loneliness and limited time was a calculated lie. She was still being manipulated, just for different reasons than she had thought. That evening, Emma called the number for Agent Morrison from a burner phone she had purchased with Harold's cash. A woman answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Mrs. Winchester, I've been expecting your call." "How did you know it was me?" "Because Harold told me you were smart enough to find his emergency protocols, and brave enough to use them. We need to meet immediately. Your husband's cover has been blown and there are people looking for both of you." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, in a public place where Emma felt she would be safe. Agent Morrison turned out to be the same judge who had performed her wedding ceremony, though she now wore casual clothes and carried herself like someone accustomed to dangerous situations. "Judge Morrison?" Emma asked, confused. "My real name is Sarah Morrison, and I'm a federal agent who specializes in deep cover operations. The judge identity was created specifically for Harold's mission. Your marriage needed to be legally binding and completely authentic to maintain his cover." Agent Morrison explained that Harold had been tracking a network of foreign operatives who were systematically infiltrating American institutions. His wealth and social connections made him the perfect candidate to operate at the highest levels of society, gathering intelligence that traditional agents could never access. "The nursing student recruitment wasn't about using you as spies," Morrison continued. "Harold identified that healthcare workers were being targeted for recruitment by hostile foreign agencies. By creating his own network first, He could monitor and protect potential targets while feeding false information back to enemy handlers. Emma felt overwhelmed by the layers of deception and counter-deception. So the 3 previous wives, they weren't murdered? They were relocated with new identities when their covers were compromised. It's standard protocol for protecting civilian assets. Morrison leaned forward, her expression serious. But your situation is different, Emma. Harold's identity has been exposed by someone inside our own organization. There's a mole in the agency and they've put both of you on a hit list. What does that mean for me? It means that in less than 48 hours, when Harold returns from what he thinks is a routine intelligence gathering trip in Europe, assassins will be waiting for both of you at the house. Harold doesn't know about the leak yet. We've been maintaining radio silence to avoid alerting the mole. You're the only one who can warn him. Morrison slid an encrypted phone across the table. This contains a direct line to Harold's secure contact in Europe. You need to call him tonight and use the code phrase, "The nightingale has stopped singing." He'll know what it means and will go into immediate extraction protocol. Emma stared at the phone, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What about me? What happens to my life, my studies, my family? If we can identify and eliminate the mole, you might be able to return to a normal life, eventually. If not, you'll need to disappear permanently with a new identity. I won't lie to you, Emma. This isn't the marriage arrangement you thought you were signing up for. You're now a key asset in a national security operation, and your life will never be completely ordinary again. That night, Emma sat in her luxurious bedroom staring at the encrypted phone, knowing that her next decision would determine not only her own fate, but Harold's as well. Despite all the lies and manipulations, she realized that somewhere along the way, she had begun to care about the lonely old man who had shown her genuine kindness, even if it was mixed with deception. At exactly midnight, she dialed Harold's secure number. He answered immediately as if he had been waiting by the phone. Emma? Is everything all right? Harold, I need to tell you something important. Emma took a deep breath. The nightingale has stopped singing. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Harold spoke again, his voice was completely different. Harder, more focused, with an authority she had never heard before. How did you learn that phrase? I found your room. I know everything, Harold. Or at least I think I do. Agent Morrison briefed me about the mole and the hit list. My God, Emma. You were never supposed to be exposed to any of this. I'm so sorry. Harold's voice carried genuine anguish. Are you somewhere safe right now? I'm at the house, but Morrison said I need to leave immediately. Harold, I'm scared. Listen to me very carefully. Go to the garage and take the silver BMW. The keys are in the glove compartment. Drive to the address Morrison gave you and wait there until I can arrange extraction. Don't trust anyone except Morrison herself, and don't use any phone except the encrypted one. What about you? I'll be fine. I've been doing this for 20 years, Emma. But I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens, don't try to contact your family or friends. These people won't hesitate to use them as leverage against you. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Harold, I'm sorry I doubted you. You had every right to doubt me. I've lied to you about almost everything since the day we met. But there's one thing I never lied about, Emma. You remind me of someone I knew long ago, someone who had the same courage and integrity you've shown tonight. If we survive this, I promise to tell you the whole truth about everything. The line went dead, leaving Emma alone in the mansion that had briefly been her home. As she gathered the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind, she realized that her quiet life as a broke nursing student was officially over. Whatever happened next, Emma Rodriguez Winchester was about to discover just how dangerous love could be when it was mixed with international espionage and deadly secrets. Emma drove through the night in Harold's silver BMW, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The safe house address led her to a modest apartment building in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where no one asked questions about strangers coming and going at odd hours. Agent Morrison was waiting for her with coffee and a grim expression. Harold made contact 30 minutes ago. He's safe for now, but the situation is worse than we initially thought. The mole isn't just selling information. They've been systematically eliminating our deep cover assets for months. Harold's operation was the biggest prize on their list. Emma sank into a worn armchair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. How many people have died because of this? Too many. But your warning may have saved Harold's life, and his intelligence network is the key to identifying the traitor. Morrison pulled out a laptop and showed Emma a series of surveillance photos. We believe the mole is one of 3 people with access to Harold's real identity. The problem is, we can't investigate without alerting them that we know. The photos showed 2 men and 1 woman, all of whom looked like ordinary government employees. Emma studied their faces, trying to imagine which one had sentenced Harold and potentially dozens of other agents to death. What happens now? Now we wait. Harold is implementing a false flag operation to draw out the mole. He's going to let it slip that he's discovered new intelligence about a high-value target, something so sensitive that only the 3 suspects will have access to it. Whichever one passes the information to enemy handlers will reveal themselves. Emma spent the next 3 days in the safe house, feeling like a prisoner despite Morrison's assurances that she was there for her own protection. She tried to focus on her nursing textbooks, but concentration was impossible when she didn't know if Harold was alive or dead. The encrypted phone remained stubbornly silent. On the 4th morning, Morrison burst into the apartment with news. We got him. The mole tried to sell Harold's false intelligence 12 hours ago. Federal agents are making the arrest as we speak. What about Harold? Is he safe? Morrison's expression grew complicated. That's where things get interesting. Harold's extraction didn't go as planned. It turns out he's been running a secondary operation that even I didn't know about. Emma, your husband has been playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. Before Emma could ask what that meant, the encrypted phone finally rang. Harold's voice sounded tired but alive, and Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. Emma, are you all right? I'm fine, but Morrison says you've been keeping more secrets. Harold chuckled, the sound warm despite the circumstances. Just one more, and it's the most important one. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Everything I told you about my first wife dying of cancer was true. What I didn't tell you was that she was also a federal agent and she was murdered by the same network we've been fighting. Her name was Elena Rodriguez. Emma felt the world stop spinning. Rodriguez, that's my last name. Elena was your aunt, Emma, your father's sister. She changed her name when she went deep cover, and your family never knew she was anything more than a wealthy widow who had married well and moved away. When I lost her, I spent years looking for a way to honor her memory and continue her work. Emma's mind reeled as pieces began falling into place. You've been watching my family. Protecting your family, Harold corrected. Elena made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would look after her brother's children. I've been quietly helping with your parents' finances for years, making sure your father's business got the contracts it needed to survive, ensuring your mother's medical bills were covered when she had that health scare 3 years ago. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she realized the truth. You didn't choose me randomly. You chose me because I'm Elena's niece. I chose you because you have her courage, her integrity, and her stubborn determination to help people no matter the cost. When I saw you working at that party, trying to stay invisible while serving people who treated you like furniture, you reminded me so much of Elena that it took my breath away. Agent Morrison was watching Emma with a sympathetic expression. There's more, Emma. Elena left something for her family, something Harold has been holding in trust until he found the right time to share it. Harold's voice grew gentle. Elena started a foundation before she died, funded with money from our joint accounts. It's been growing for 15 years, and it's now worth over $50 million. The foundation provides scholarships for nursing, students from low-income families, exactly the kind of program Elena always dreamed of creating. Emma could barely speak through her tears. She set up scholarships for people like me. People exactly like you. Elena believed that healthcare was the most important battlefield in protecting innocent people, and she wanted to make sure there would always be people with integrity working in hospitals and clinics. The foundation has been operating anonymously, but Elena specified in her will that when her niece Emma Rodriguez became a registered nurse, she should be offered the position of director. The magnitude of what Harold was telling her slowly sank in. Her mysterious Aunt Elena, who had supposedly died young and wealthy, had actually been a federal agent who had created a legacy specifically designed to help people like Emma pursue careers in nursing. So our marriage, Emma said slowly, it really was about loneliness and companionship. It was about a lot of things, Harold admitted. I needed operational cover, yes, but I also needed someone I could trust completely, someone who shared Elena's values and wouldn't be corrupted by wealth or power. I wanted to get to know Elena's niece and see if she had inherited her aunt's remarkable character. Agent Morrison leaned forward. The foundation offer is real, Emma, but you need to understand what accepting it would mean. You'd be taking over Elena's work, which includes some aspects that go beyond traditional charity. The foundation serves as a front for protecting healthcare workers who uncover evidence of foreign interference or domestic corruption. Emma felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her. You're asking me to become what Elena was. I'm asking you to become who you already are, Harold said gently. Elena would be so proud of the woman you've become, Emma. You discovered my secret, figured out how to contact the right people, and risked your life to save mine. You have all the skills needed to continue her work. Over the next few hours, Emma learned the full truth about Elena Rodriguez Winchester. Her aunt had been recruited by the CIA straight out of nursing school, using her medical background to gather intelligence in hospitals and clinics around the world. She had saved countless lives by identifying assassination attempts, uncovering biological weapons programs, and protecting vulnerable patients from exploitation. The foundation Elena created wasn't just about scholarships. It was about building a network of ethical healthcare professionals who could serve as the first line of defense against those who would abuse the medical system for harmful purposes. Emma's recruitment had always been about more than marriage or money. It had been about carrying on a family legacy she never knew existed. What about us? Emma asked Harold during a quiet moment. What happens to our marriage now that the crisis is over? Harold was quiet for a long time. That's entirely up to you, Emma. The marriage was legally contracted, but emotionally, well, I think we both know it became something neither of us expected. I care about you deeply, but I also know I've put you through an impossible situation. If you want an annulment, I'll understand completely. Emma thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks. The scared, desperate student who had agreed to marry a stranger was gone, replaced by someone who had discovered strength, purpose, and a connection to a legacy she was proud to continue. I'd like to try being married to the real Harold Winchester, she said finally. The one who loved my Aunt Elena, who protected my family for years without asking for anything in return, and who trusted me enough to share his most dangerous secrets. But I want a real partnership this time, with honesty and equality. Harold's laugh carried joy and relief in equal measure. I would like nothing more than to be your husband, Emma Rodriguez Winchester, and I promise that from now on, the only secrets I keep will be the ones necessary to protect the people we're trying to help. 6 months later, Emma stood in front of a room full of nursing students announcing the Elena Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Program. She wore her wedding ring with pride now, not as a symbol of a desperate bargain, but as a reminder of the love story between Harold and Elena that had shaped her own destiny. Her parents sat in the front row, finally understanding why their finances had mysteriously improved over the years, and why their daughter had suddenly married a wealthy older man. They had initially been skeptical, but watching Harold and Emma together, they could see the genuine affection and partnership that had grown between them. Emma, quote, "Yes, transformation from broke student to foundation director had been remarkable, but not as remarkable as her transformation from frightened young woman to confident leader. She had discovered that sometimes the most dangerous situations led to the most meaningful destinations, and that love could indeed conquer fear when it was built on truth.